A little bit about today. Really excited to have this conversation tying in, sustainability with people, planet, and profit. I have three remarkable speakers and practitioners with me today, so I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning from them. Before we get started, though, we'll do a round of introductions. And I'm going to start out by saying, hi, my name is Chisom. I am an economist and also the founder of Diversify. So I'm a DEI practitioner and strategist. Super happy to be here today. I'm also going to quickly describe myself. And I'm going to do that by, this is always the tricky part. Like some days I do it really well and other days I'm just like, how do I do this? So let's see how I do it today. So I am a Black woman, roundish, ovalish face. I am wearing a beret that is off-white in color. I'm wearing a sweater, and perhaps what is visible is kind of just the brown bits of the sweater. And I guess when I raise my hands up, you see kind of like the maroonish part of it. Now, my screen behind me is blurred out, but what is visible is perhaps the makings of a mirror that kind of has like a black bamboo around it. And to my right is a blurred out a hanging shelf of a lot of the books I like to read. Okay, that was a bit stressful. I haven't done this in like 2 months, but really happy to be here. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to pass on the torch to Kenny because you're the first on my screen.
Thank you so much, Chisom. My name is Kenny, and I'm the Vice President of Sustainable Business in the development part of Novo Nordisk, a global pharmaceutical company. I'm right now sitting at home in my kitchen that you can see behind me. It's a black kitchen, so not much visible on the screen. I'm wearing a blue shirt and a green jacket, and I'm having my summer hair with lots of curls, and that's a new thing, so I'm trying that out. I am representing Novo Nordisk, as I mentioned. I have the daily responsibility to mix in diversity and inclusion with sustainability and our global footprint, and also supporting our leaders and employees in feeling well at work. So I feel a very big responsibility for engaging with many of our colleagues and make sure that they can all come to work and be the best versions of themselves. And I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation here.
Thanks, Kenny. Heidi, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi Pech, and I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion speaker, mentor, and advisor. If I first describe myself, so I'm a white woman. I'm based in Finland, and I have a Finnish heritage and origins. I have a shoulder-length long bob, I think is the right term actually, dark brown hair and quite dark eyebrows. I'm wearing today like a hot pink linen t-shirt and same color lipstick to make like a nice matching color pop. And my background is also blurred. I'm at my home office. You can't see very much of my background, but I have on my left I have a window and just a white wall and some bookshelf at behind. Professionally, I have an HR background. I was working in HR for almost 20 years, and that's how I end up working in DEI as well. I've been working with DEI topics since about 2018, and I was initially in an in-house role, so I was a head of DEI in a tech consultancy company here in Finland called Futurize. And about 1 year ago, I jumped out of my salaried job and founded my own business. And now I get to help much more widely clients with the topics on how to integrate DEI in their organizations and businesses in a sustainable and impactful way. Really happy to be here. Looking forward to the exciting chat.
Thanks for sharing. Stine? I hear an echo.
So, hi everyone. My name is Stine Rebekka Aksnes. I've done this before, but it's been a while. I'm a brown woman with dark brown, almost black hair, long hair in a ponytail to the side. I'm wearing silk blouse with collars. I'm sitting in my home office in Oslo. Uh, and in the background, I didn't get to blur my backgrounds. It was something wrong with the, well, anyway. So you can definitely see my home office there, and I have a poster in the background with the from the place called Louisiana, which is in Copenhagen, where Kenny is at. And I also have a bookshelf and actually a lamp from the previous owners that's still here. And I'm working today as a CEO in a company called cChange. They are working they have a research-based framework for taking a holistic approach on how you work with sustainability. So it's really exciting to learn everything about that approach. It's really powerful and something that we really need as practitioners. And I have been a practitioner on this field for a long time, more than a decade within sustainability, coming now recently from sustainability director role in Soplasteria, which is tech consultancy responsible there for integrating sustainability throughout the whole value chain. And previously, I have experience from consultancies and from communication roles, different type of communication roles as well. I'm really happy to be here as well to talk about one of my favorite themes.
Thank you all for being here. Just a quick run through on how this will work. We have about an hour and a half to discuss what will go in, like a lot of the different themes that are intertwined in this, and then we have 30 minutes at the end for Q&A. Just checking with everyone, is there an echo in the background when I speak or no? No? Okay, that's great. All right, so I'm going to jump right in because when we talk about sustainability as it relates to people, planet, and profits, you know, when we talk about the people aspect, we think about the social responsibility, which has given or gotten a lot of like attention in the past year and a half or 2 years, especially given the EU directive. And then the environmental sustainability, which I think a lot of people are more accustomed to when we engage on themes around sustainability. And of course, profits aspect, which sometimes we tend to stay away from, but it is absolutely important for the sustainability of any business, any initiative. Like we have to look at what does the economics and like the finances look like. So then within this overarching topic, you know, I think both Kenny, Heidi, and Stine, you all bring like very unique perspectives to it. So just to kind of like establish like a foundational, where are we starting from? I'd like to ask each one of you to share what this means to you. Like in your view, what is the relationship between workplace, society, and say interpersonal or financial relationship when we talk about sustainability? Kenny, you're the lucky first again, because you're the first on my screen. What do you think?
Thank you. What a privilege to be the first one. I think for definitely for me and also for Novo Nordisk, this triple lens into sustainability, both on people, profit, and planet, is something that we have integrated deep into our way of running the business. So I think it goes back more than 30 years that Novo Nordisk actually coined the term of triple bottom line by one of our previous executive colleagues. And since then, we've been working very diligently in integrating that holistic responsibility into the way we run our business. So I think, at least as a colleague in Novo Nordisk, it is deeply ingrained in our values and in the way we run our business. I think when I then, from my point of view, look at how we run our business, the people side kind of splits up in two. So internally, we have the employees, and externally, we have the patients that we serve. And the patients can then be split in those who are parts of our clinical trials and then those who are in need of our medications. And I think for the sustainability or the responsibility part, it both goes in terms of the employees, that we take good care of them, that we offer them the best opportunities to be their true selves at work, but also to grow and develop and to participate and contribute to the company as best as they can. And the responsibility on the patient side is, of course, to make sure we discover, deliver, and develop medicines that will help people with chronic diseases live better lives and healthier lives. Some of the newer things we've been looking into is the whole prevention element. So with all the knowledge we've built up over the last 100 years, what is it we can also contribute in the preventive space, which I think then speaks into the whole societal responsibility. And of course, we are a public company. We are very uniquely to the pharma industry. We're owned by a foundation, a very charitable foundation, actually the wealthiest foundation in the world, donating a lot of money into research and of obviously vulnerable patients and different other aspects. So I think just giving a few perspectives on what it means for me and for us as a company, both on the employee side internally and also externally with our patients.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I always think it's quite remarkable to be like part of an organization that is over a century old. It's quite cool, right? And
yes,
it would be interesting to be like a fly on the wall like 100 years ago and be like, what were you thinking about at this point? And like, what has changed now?
yes.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Heidi, coming to you.
Yeah, I think for me, so if I think of organizations and specifically of companies, then of course they don't work in isolation of the society, but they in fact form a fairly significant part of the society. And as such, then I think it's also their responsibility to, well, of course, to obey the laws and regulations in terms of the, for example, the social and environmental sustainability that are set to them. But also, I think for like a responsible organization within a society does also more than just obeys the set regulations. And I think this tied to the whole profit side, in order to be able to act responsibly in a way that's good both for the environment and good for the people within the society and the employees. I think a company, being a company, the purpose is to make money. So in order to be able to kind of like be a profitable and be able to also use some part of that into being responsible, you need to also make sure that you are successful financially.
Thanks a lot for sharing. And Stine, coming to you.
Well, it's a great question and great answers, you know, from an organizational point of view. And I think I totally agree with what's been said. And also, you know, just stressing that, you know, these three pillars, the three Ps, all three of them have to bear significance if something or an initiative is to be classified as sustainable. So like an environmental project, like you just said, you know, it's not sustainable if it does significant harm to one or two of the other pillars. So when I first started working on this field, many were saying, well, the planet is most important because without the planet, we don't have no people and no profit. But however, it's we, the people, that have actually exploited the planet's natural resources. And the planet doesn't fix itself without us, the people, taking action. So the three Ps are mutually dependent on each other. And, you know, it's really important to stress that, because there's, you know, I met many sustainability officers who are only concerned with the environmental aspect of sustainability. And I've attended so many sustainability conferences that are only concerned with the environmental aspect of sustainability. So that's why I love how you guys do it, how Diversify does it, like by taking this holistic approach that is truly sustainable. Because you're not sustainable, initiative is not sustainable if it's just environmentally proactive, if it's not something that customers will buy, or it doesn't make value creational sense, or if it's harmful to people, or it's not, then it's not profitable. So we have many examples of that, and we can see it also in the society and interpersonal relationships as well.
Thanks a lot. I guess to your points, I often think about kind of just like, the connection between all three is people. I mean, for the most part, I think without people, you don't make money. Without people, you don't necessarily have an environment, or maybe you can't damage an environment. And without people, of course, we can't really think within this construct of what is the planet aspect of it, what is, the profit aspect of it, and also kind of like what is our role within this big machine, and what responsibilities do we have as individuals, as workplaces, and societies at large. Stine, I'm going to stay with you because I want to talk a little bit around how oftentimes within organizations, good intentions does not necessarily materialize into tangible actions. So what by this I mean that oftentimes organizations have lofty goals and make, strong statements about, how they're sustainable or what their aims and ambitions are. But in reality, when you start saying, what can I measure? What can I track? How do I hold you accountable for, measurable results? You don't really, it goes crickets, right? You don't actually see things you can measure. So my question for you is, what concrete steps and fundamental changes, be it same leadership mindset or operational practices, need to be incorporated within workplaces to ensure that it's just not, like what's it called, like lip service or like greenwashing or whatever it is. Like, what concrete steps have to be taken to ensure that they integrate principles equitably into the fabric of their organizational processes?
That's a great question, and it's a really big as well. But just to say some background on it, I think what you're saying is totally right. But my fundamental mind shifts have to happen as well as concrete measures, and the changes must sort of occur on multiple levels, from the leadership mindsets to the operational practices, as you said, Chisom. And I think it's important to know our background and our history as well. Like, for a long time, the prevalent business mindset have been, that of the American economist Milton Friedman, which is the business of business is business. Because he famously argued that, the only social responsibility a business should have would be to maximize shareholder profit, right? But we come away since then, and it's now widespread knowledge that the business of business also includes its environment and the people and the society that it impacts and is impacted by. And I think it's important also to acknowledge, if we want to make fundamental change, we have to understand the fundamental root causes by the way of our thinking. And the dominant way of viewing the world is still very mechanical, traditional economist mindset, viewing each of them as sort of separate entities, self-serving entities, and the cost and effect relations. And I think the time is here to take a more integrated and holistic perspective. And just a little bit of commercial, not commercial, but I can really deeply recommend a book that one of my colleagues made, which wrote, which is called "You Matter More Than You Think." That book really integrates quantum physics with social sciences. And what that shows, if you look at quantum physics, it really shows that, we're not separate entities, we're actually entangled in each other. So what we do really has bare consequences on every one of us. And understanding that mindset, that the business is not a separate entity, it really is affected by society and affects society. And So we all need to take a more holistic approach, and not just the leaders, because the leaders are influenced by the people, and the leaders are actually the people as well, in general as well. So I think, you know, just like CEOs largely, you have to stop me if I'm going to long part, but the CEOs, you know, have previously largely been concerned with measuring and tracking financial results, and as they should, working closely with the CFO. But at the same time, we need, you know, tomorrow's leaders, and going forward, we need leaders that also track the environmental impact of the company, and actually also the people impact of the company, just as rigorously as the financials, and they need to be held accountable for that. And when it comes to like operational practices, I don't know if I'm going over time, but when it comes to operational practices, we must really understand the role of the business in the society. What's the core competence of the most material impacts? And then we have to work on those impacts in the company, and throughout the whole value chain, where everyone knows their role as sustainability officers, because everyone's a sustainability leader. So the people in procurement, they need to know, how does our buying policies influence the organization we buy from? How does those organizations influence people and the environment and the profit of our business as well? And the same thing goes with HR. You know, the HR people need to know not just the traditional leadership skills, but they also need to know DEI skills now for a more integrated approach. They need to know the environmental impact, and need to train the employees to know the impact of the organization, and so it goes on throughout the whole value chain. And we do get some help, thankfully, from the legislation and the reporting regimes for bigger size company as well. So I'm just going to stop there, because I could just talk for ages.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I have to say, I felt a little bit targeted with that economics comment, but it is true. We tend to think the business of business is business. So I'm like, okay, we need to do better. But yes, thanks a lot for that. So I'm going to go next, actually, which is quite a good segue on the business of business is business, to Kenny, because as much as it is always important to prioritize, you know, the environment, people, and all these other things that matter from this holistic perspective, businesses still have to be accountable to their shareholders, to their employees. They still have to pay salaries. They still have to create some type of value, right? And I think this is often something that is not engaged with enough. And sometimes from the outside looking in, it's just easy to say, yeah, why don't you make that decision? Why don't you not do that? Even though it will potentially cost that business a lot of money, and businesses losing money also means that people will potentially also lose their jobs. So Kenny, my question to you is, how can businesses genuinely commit to sustainability when doing so might actually mean they have to sacrifice short or even semi-long-term profits, which could lead to job losses or reduce shareholder value? So is it ever justifiable to prioritize environment and social goals over the financial well-being and livelihoods of employees and investors?
Yeah, that's a big question, but I think I will just very briefly summarize what Stine just said. We cannot afford not to, because simply, and now speaking also from a pharmaceutical point of view, our patients simply demand of us to be responsible, thinking about the environment and the social responsibilities. So we cannot not do it. By not doing it, or by not investing in it, we will lose business on the long term, because they will choose other providers. So we've been in the insulin business for over 100 years. We have competitors that they can turn to. So if we don't think about what is it when we provide a patient with an injectable pen, we also provide them with a piece of plastic that eventually is a piece of waste. So what is our responsibility in not pushing that onto the patient, but actually making sure that when we deliver a device, that we also have a take-back solution to make sure that we take the responsibility of offering you a medical solution, but we also take the responsibility of reducing the waste. And I think with the younger generations being much more vocal and being much more demanding in seeing real results, we simply cannot not invest in this. And it is big investments that goes into it. And with the Take Back program, we've actually collaborated across the medical industry or the pharmaceutical industry with other insulin companies, because on waste, we really don't compete. We should all collaborate, because the more we can take back and reuse and recycle and making sure it doesn't end up in landfill, the better it is for everyone. So I think boiling it down to the fact that we can't avoid it, but I think also we can easily commit and we can easily say all these nice and fluffy commitments and put it in our annual reports, but it's really when we disclose the progress we're making, disclosing the results we're making and the plans to get to those targets we set, is really where it becomes real actions instead of lip service, as you also mentioned. And I think in terms of investors, we get on a weekly basis questions from raters and rankers, investors, on our sustainability approach, on our social responsibility, on our investments and all of this, to make sure that they also investigate and value whether we are doing things right, to uphold the value we have as a company. So I think we are definitely feeling the needed pressure from many stakeholders around us, and it is up to us to show that we are delivering. And it is, and finally, also bringing in again the internal perspective. Definitely, our colleagues and employees are equally pushing hard for the sustainability agenda, not to be, greenwashing or lip service. They're asking directly very blunt and honest questions to our senior leaders on what we're doing to reduce, impacts and emissions, what we're doing to reduce footprint and also recycle and food waste and all of these elements that we're all a part of every day. What is it we're doing to make that better?
Really great questions. And I think it's quite nice that pressure, or for lack of a better word, but that encouragement, strong encouragement, is also coming from your stakeholders. Kenny, I'm going to stay with you just for a follow-up question, because I often engage with companies of different sizes where the larger organizations are like, yeah, this is a no-brainer, we have to do it. But the smaller ones, they often lament about how expensive this process is. So I guess the question I'm trying to formulate on the go is it, because at least I'm thinking that maybe it's not relevant, maybe it's not important that they do it all at once. But what I'm hearing you say is that they need to start where they can, right? And like trying to be sustainable. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. And I think also the responsibility is also on us as big companies, big global pharmaceutical companies. We have to lead the way, and we have to take some of the big investments and develop solutions that smaller companies can then latch onto. So we shouldn't all be doing our own little thing. We have to think holistically around this. As I said before, we're not competing on the environment. We have to collaborate. So I think also what we are doing with a lot of our smaller suppliers is that we've set a target in 2045. I think we want our supply chain to also be carbon neutral, but we're committing to helping with that. So we're not just saying, if you don't live up to it, we won't deal with you, but we're actually leaning in, sharing all of our learnings and knowledges, systems, technologies, to enable smaller companies who also have very ambitious targets but who might not have the same capabilities, to say, why don't we share this technology, or why don't we lend you some of the resources we have to help you get started on this? And I think that's for me also a very responsible approach that I'm proud of we're taking. And I think more bigger companies should look into the value chain of how to impact other smaller businesses.
Absolutely. That sounds really great because it kind of like reduces the barrier to entry and they don't have to start from zero when they have kind of like, okay, this is how we do it, this is how it works, and they can take what they need. That's pretty great.
And in addition, if I can just add, it also helps the smaller companies know that if we make those big investments to move in a green direction, we actually have a big client like Novo supporting us. And we're doing long-term commitments with those partners and vendors who are committing to this. So I think it's also that joint responsibility of making the needed investments, but also the security of their business.
Absolutely. Sounds great. I need to work for Novo Nordisk. Are you hiring? But anyways, Heidi, I'm gonna come to you. So I think Kenya has also kind of basically mentioned that, you know, companies like Novo Nordisk are facing, you know, just those requests or demands from stakeholders and clients and customers. And this is kind of what we see happening in the world today, and especially like with the younger generation coming up, you know, they're not just going to accept the bare minimum. And this also means that there is a lot of conversation around increasing diverse voices, profiles, and perspectives in how we engage with or drive innovations in order to create solutions that does not inadvertently exclude people. So my question to you is, what strategies can companies implement to do a better job in terms of like attracting and retaining these different profiles that help them drive the much needed change? And a second part of that question is, why are these profiles actually important for companies to remain both or to kind of like unlock both their competitive and their comparative advantage?
Thanks. I think this also will not have a short answer to it, but maybe if I start from the last part, actually. So I see that so most companies are either producing some kind of products or services, and most of the time, either it's like directly to the end users and customers, or to like B2B to some other kind of business that then does something with it, and so on. But in order to be able to create products and services that are relevant for the wide customer base, so the whole society, you need to have understanding of who actually are the clients and what kind of solutions would work for them. And I think this is one of the critical business reasons why every organization needs to understand, like for us specifically, what's the business reason for having a diverse employee base. So kind of like understanding who are our products and services, who are they for, and therefore who do we need to have working for us so that we can better serve those clients of ours. Then from another perspective, of course, like being a member of the society, the organization should be able to provide opportunities for a number of different kinds of people. And we also know that there's lots of research that shows that companies that have diverse and equitable practices, they actually make better business. The financial results are better, as well as they are more creative, they get more money from innovation, etc., etc. But like literally, they make better business. And then I think the other part, how to then attract these kind of like maybe new kinds of candidates or new kind of employees that have not been previously, maybe have not been attracted so well into the company. I think first of all, it's good to set targets. I think that's the one that like generally that's how businesses operate. Like you set targets and then you start working towards the targets. When I was working in the head of DEI role, and we had some kind of like targets, how do we want to diversify the people we hire? And then like some of the very common, very initial questions that I was getting was that, okay, so does this mean that we need to start lowering the bar? Like we need to basically start letting go of some of our criteria? is there some kind of quotas? Are we just gonna hire people based on whatever characteristics? And of course, the answer is no to both of those questions, because I think that's too simplistic thinking that you would just hire somebody because, I don't know, you need more women in your management team, so you just go and hire a woman. Of course not. In the same way as any financial targets you have, you don't try to achieve them by not paying taxes, hopefully. So I think it's the same way. Like, if the target is there so that it forces you to actually think of new ways, new strategies on how you do things. So internally, I think this is a very wide topic, but like if we start small, so internally making sure that the recruitment hiring process, that doesn't have any inbuilt unrecognized bias there. So making sure that the process is actually equitable and takes into account the needs of different people. The people who are making the recruitment decisions at different stages of the hiring, that they are aware of what is inclusive hiring, what kind of biases they may have, and have ways to mitigate the impact of those biases. But then I think it's also about, like, how do you generally communicate about the organization outside? So I think that actually the first part, before you start hiring diverse people, I think first you need to get the inclusion part correct. So first making sure that you like genuinely have an inclusive culture and equitable practices within the company, and then start talking about those outside. So it means, like, in terms of, for example, like what kind of messages do you give outside when you have experts speaking somewhere? Like, who are those people? What do the people look like who go to some professional conferences to talk about their specialist topic? Are they all white middle-aged men, in our case Finnish, for example? Or is there, like, can the people who are considering applying for jobs, like, are they seeing only one type of people, or are they seeing several kinds of people? So the representation also matters here. And then finally, if we think about, like, you know, how do people end up into the recruitment funnel, like the applying? So if in previous times, if there's been certain job boards or whatnot, job recruitment fairs or so, and those have produced certain kind of candidates into the pipeline, if nothing is changed there, then nothing changes in the end result. So also it means that you need to start thinking more widely there. Like, what are the type of diversities, like what are the kind of backgrounds that we would like to attract more of? Where are people with this kind of backgrounds? Where are they? What are the networks they are present in? What kind of communities are they part of? And start building the relationships there. And like kind of like showcasing there, like what are the opportunities for people. So I think it's there's like both like a very small, like low-hanging fruit, small things you can do, but then at the same time, it's a whole culture change with the creating like an inclusive culture and equitable practices. So it's like small things and a major change at the same time.
Thanks for sharing, Heidi. I also tend to think that at least for me, sometimes the way I see people engage with, or workplaces engage with, say, diversity, equity, inclusion, I think that, you know, these things are still viewed as a nice to have rather than a business imperative. And there needs to be that understanding that it's a business imperative.
Yeah.
Like, it's not because you want to be nice. It's not necessarily because you want to be socially responsible or you want to include people who are different from you. It means just trying to understand the business that you're in and understanding that within that business that you're in, you have a responsibility to, like, even say if you have a responsibility to your stakeholders or like to your shareholders, you have a responsibility to grow that business. You have a responsibility to know who you serve, and who you serve oftentimes is quite different. And there's a question I want to ask Kenny about this, because when you're in the business of healthcare, there is no discrimination. Like, people get sick, people need help, people need services. But I see that Stine wanted to say something, so I'm just going to pause and then follow up with Kenny afterwards. Stine?
No, I just wanted to quick comment. I don't have something with the I'm on the phone, so I can't really, I just have to do like this. Yeah, I just had like a quick comment to Heidi there, and it ties in with what you one time said yourself, Chisom, and it's like recruiting for a culture ad, not a cultural fit, is really of essence on bringing more diversity. And that is not easy because it's a lot of people, including good people like myself, that really wants diversity, and then it comes to becomes kind of lip service because you really have to know yourself and know your own biases in order to be able to actually do the to recruit culture, for a culture fit. Like just a little example, like in soap area, there's like predominantly men, so we were looking for that type of diversity. Now I'm working in a place with mostly women and with a whole different type of background, and so it's amazing for me to to experience that, because we all want diversity, but at the same time we still think, women with the research-based background is really safe because it really understands. So, no, maybe we need a man now. Maybe we need somebody from with thinking about the three P's with more economic or totally different point of view to make us more innovative and profitable and all those things.
Can you please go on? Thanks, Stine.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And what I've seen work in our business because we also try to help leaders understand that the culture ad is the way to go, and they say how to do it. So we always encourage them to start with looking at the team composition. So what do you have today? What would you benefit from adding? So rather than just going the default way and replacing whoever left for a position with whatever I had before because I know it works, just map it out very simply. It doesn't have to be extensive analysis, but actually just that intentional mapping of the team composition. Then you can actually see what you could benefit from adding. So I think that's a very practical way of approaching the culture ad.
Couldn't agree more. And to a point, I think Stine made on it is difficult to know all our biases. Absolutely. Because most of the times when we come face to face with our bias, then we're more aware. Now, the danger is for the biases that remain unconscious that we don't even know are present within us. And one of the things that has helped me practically on this is just to always assume that I have bias. Never assume that, I don't. So I don't start the question from like, oh, how inclusive am I? I often ask myself, how am I being exclusionary? Like, what am I not thinking about? Who am I not including in the room? Whose perspective have I not heard? And just always knowing that no matter how well I try to do, that there is that room that I will always make mistakes in. And I think that is both humbling, and that also allows me to seek out other perspectives as well. So thank you all for sharing. Kenya, I want to come back to you on, this responsibility with, of course, like looking at cultural ad, but also viewing it from the perspective of it is a business imperative to actually think like that because we're able to grow more, to produce more value societally and also internally within the workplace. So my question is, pharmaceutical companies like Novo Nordisk, they face intense scrutiny regarding, say, for example, things like drug pricing and also their profit margins. So my question is, how can a company like yours strike the balance between maintaining profitability for shareholders and ensuring that the financial success of the company leads to meaningful and sustainable benefits for society, and in particular, for patients and communities that are vulnerable?
Yeah, that is a big responsibility, I think. In terms of prices, obviously there are limits to what I can talk about and share, but I think I just want to call out the very big differences in how prices are set across the world. It is very different. We hear a lot about extreme high prices in the US. We can just disclose that in Novo Nordisk, our prices to the American health societies are declining and have been declining for many years. So of course we're questioning that gap. Where are the money really going? Because the prices to the patients are increasing. I think from also not assuming that anyone knows the drug development process, but it in average takes around 15 years from discovery to we're ready to go to the market. In those 15 years, we pay a lot of costs in running trials, in investigating, in disclosing, in collecting data and everything else. And then we go to market and have a short window of time to earn those 15 years of investments. So I think that process of just understanding how that game looks like is very, very difficult. And it's very not transparent to the average consumer or patient. But I think the responsibility that we have to make sure that the profits also benefits the societies very much speaks into our social responsibility and the commitments we're making, both in terms of designing and running what we call prevention programs. We have prevention programs for children. We have prevention programs that links with big cities. So I think we have 25 or 30 big cities across the globe where we, with the knowledge and insights we have as a pharmaceutical company with more than 100 years behind us, that we team up with politicians, with universities, with cities to figure out, when you do everything from urban design to school planning to investments in sports activities, how do you as a community actually make sure that you cover as much as possible? And that we're putting quite a lot of resources into. And that, of course, comes from the profits we make from the patients who are suffering from chronic diseases. And then again, coming back to this whole being owned by a foundation. Of course, we are a business, we're making money, we also have happy stakeholders, but we really put a lot of investments into the society and the responsibilities. Teaming up with also, when we see conflicts in Ukraine or in Gaza, that we, with the Red Cross and the Save the Children, all of these organizations that help people in situations that are very vulnerable, we also support there and donate and make sure the medicines are available. And then we also bring investments to some of their projects. So I think we do take a big responsibility, and we are really also internally sharing a lot of these commitments to also make sure that our employees sometimes come up with good ideas on what can I do in my little local community with maybe some funding or some help from Novo Nordisk, to say, could I run a sports camp for my son's football team? Could I do something extra? I know that I have a colleague who's an expert in nutrition. Why don't I, arrange a little thing for my football team? So small little things that also adds up to this notion on social responsibility.
Thanks a lot for sharing. Oftentimes when, I think of leadership, be it organizational leadership or workplace leadership, I often reflect on, that people, at least in my view, sometimes, because when I see bad leadership at work, I reflect on, sorry, my son is just walking into the room, but okay, this should go well. I reflect on the fact that sometimes people do not seemingly understand the responsibility that comes with leading an organization, leading a team, leading people. I feel like that is oftentimes missing, so to say. So what is, yeah, I'm trying not to stay distracted, but okay, working from home, that's how it goes. I guess what I'm trying to say here about responsibility is that you don't just become a leader because of the company you run or because of the position you hold. Of course, that is how leadership tends to happen, but there's that importance of recognizing what aspect of formal leadership we need, and also that aspect of informal leadership, because sometimes you might actually find people who do not have that formal role of CEO or C of that, but within an organizational or like even societal basis, they carry a lot of power because they're able to adapt to the people for whom they are advocating for. Yeah. And that's kind of like what I'm hearing in some sense from what you're saying is, it goes beyond just leading on the basis of the name. Like you actually have to action it and take this responsibility quite seriously.
Yeah. And I think we also see a big movement from what we call our employee resource groups. So voluntarily groups of or communities of people that come together, whether it's within the LGBTQ community, whether it's in the international community, or whatever it could be. We have a lot of these communities where people really feel a connection or a community spirit, and that from there they build and they really support the business, but they also come with very clear requirements and recommendations to how we run our business. And that is a strong and important voice in also shaping the culture and definitely also the responsibility of the company.
Absolutely. So on staying on responsibility, Stine, I'm going to come to you. You mentioned earlier that we need new types of leadership, right? And leaders who are able to think very cohesively around people, planet, and profit. So if you could, toss out, I don't know, the adjectives, what are some skills or competencies that these leaders need to have? And a second question I have for you is, what is the responsibility of organizations to actually cultivate this type of leaders internally? Because I think oftentimes when people look for leaders, they're looking for, or within workplaces, they're looking for people who have 30 years of experience. But those who are budding leaders, how can we also develop them within the organization? And I'd also be happy to hear after Stine from Kenny and Heidi in terms of how do you think about this? Like, what about developing leaders internally rather than always trying to tap someone with 50 years of experience or 30 years of experience from that other Fortune 500 company? Stine.
Thank you for the question. First of all, just thumbs up to Kenny. I don't have the possibility to do it, so it's like, yeah. Really, really great to hear how you guys are working on this, and it really reminds me also of my former workplace as well. Well, back to your question, Chisom, about what specific competencies. I think for future CEOs, I think first of all, I think leaders, they work with people, so I think people skills is probably the most important aspect of the leaders. I think future leaders need a deep understanding of, as I said before, of DEI, because without and we just were tapped into this, without this understanding of how you impact others and how you are impacted by others, and without understanding, as you were saying, Chisom, about your own biases and how your own biases influences and hinders other people's progress, and without understanding minority and majority dynamics at the workplace, and without understanding how privilege and power plays out in the workplace, then you will have so many blind spots that will hinder the progress towards a more equitable workplace. And also, thinking surrounding about the 3 Ps, future leaders also need to understand the environmental impact, the footprint of the organization, like Kenny was talking about, and you don't necessarily have to be, as a CEO, an ecological expert, but if your organization has a footprint that is really material, then you definitely need to have the competence in place in the leader group with the relevant environmental competence, or close to the leadership group. And the same goes with the profit side, of course, but which most leaders today traditionally are already adept in. I think it's bringing the 2 other dimensions, the 2 other pieces in the forefront of our leaders' competence skill set that I think will be important for our future leaders. And I think it goes to all professions as well. Like, I don't know if you heard about the T what's it called, the T-shaped competence, which is before tech engineers, for instance, they were set to just solve one technical solution, but now we need those sustainable tech engineers that have deep technical knowledge, but at the same time they have that broader skill set that is called which is the competencies that are defined by UNESCO, which is sustainable competencies, and that is the skill set of being able to see how your solutions impact the bigger system, how the solution impacts the organizations, how the solutions impact people, how the solutions impact environment, and also is the solution ethical, the ethical and normative aspects of the solutions, also strategically thinking and collaborating with different experts in all types of fields. And that's why we also need diverse technical engineer to digitalize our future solutions. And lastly, I think that all leaders, future leaders, really need to possess skills on how to deal with complexity. And some keywords there would be change leadership, transformative leadership. Yeah, so just to cut it there. And then when you said Chisom, when it comes to how do we need to train our future leaders in the organization, I think it's definitely important to them as well to be trained in DEI leadership, as well as environmental management, not just the critical or the traditional leadership management programs, but also incorporating the complexity of the society that we live in today, and to have a holistic approach on leadership, on how we cultivate and develop leaders. And lastly, also understand everybody can't be everything. You can't be an expert on all things and on all fields, but definitely having that collaborative sense, and also being able to see yourself and have that self-care as well, I think also should come onto the workplace.
Absolutely. Just quickly on that, I also think people who have leadership aspirations should also ask themselves, am I fit to be a leader? I think it's a conversation that we need to have in all honesty with ourselves, because you can be a leader, but maybe you don't need to be a people leader, right? Or maybe even ask yourself, why do I need to be a people leader? What gives me the right? What experience, what reflections, what skill sets do I have to actually lead people? Because I think there's a responsibility in that, to think like, am I good enough to do this job? Because we need to recognize that it's a privilege to lead, but we can also, a lot of people who struggle within workplaces oftentimes struggle because of their direct managers or the leadership as a whole. So if I'm really a crappy leader, maybe I should just focus on leading whatever I'm doing and not people, so I do not cause additional harm. So I think there's also an opportunity for all of us to ask, or budding or current leaders to ask, am I actually fit for the role that I have in people leadership? Kenny, you had something to add?
Yeah, but I would like to hear if Heidi wants to go first.
Okay. I did not see Heidi. Sorry, Heidi.
Yeah, I didn't put my the hand up in the here, but I actually wanted to add that I think it's also I think one aspect is the maybe not in the top leadership kind of appointments, but some levels down is the kind of this notion of, do we look for experience or do we look for potential? I think this is quite an interesting conversation, because if we always look for experience, and we know that leadership generally is not hugely diversified, it's not going to diversify, at least not very fast, because if you already need to have proven something, then the pool is more homogeneous. And then I think my other comment was more about the that how can we then enable, how can we think about this whole topic of leadership, what is actually the requirements to be a leader. And when I was in an in-house role, it was quite an interesting conversations around this, because first off you get well, you need to have, you have proven good sales, so and then when you look at okay, well, where are the how do the salespeople look like, or the people who have been in huge tech projects? So then already you're going narrowing down what sort of people get those opportunities or end up in those roles. But then I think the very interesting conversation is what are the kind of the not kind of what's written between the lines. What does leadership look like in this organization? What do we consider to be good leadership? And I think when you start to having that conversation, then you get into this more like, okay, well, do you have to have some like what kind of characteristics are we talking about? Are these characteristics very masculine, for example? Therefore, do you always need to have, regardless of your gender, do you always need to have these kind of characteristics in order to be a good leader in this company? And challenging these aspects, because I think this is the thinking that, at least on my experience, it doesn't happen very often. We are very much looking at the, proven track record of ABC, but the kind of like the what are the like and looking at the leadership also as a whole, and I think we've already discussed it today, like kind of, and I think Kenny was talking about it, that kind of not only like if you have a free role, like what are the the specific requirements to fulfill that specific role, but what's the team around it, and like if you look at the team around it with this characteristic perspective, I think then we get into quite interesting interesting conversations and start to like kind of see that we need to look more widely.
Absolutely. Kenny?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as Stine said something before that made me think. You said you can't be all as a CEO or as a leader. You can't be it all, but what you can be is curious. You can be curious to understand the perspectives, whether it's your customers' perspectives, your competitors, your employees, your, whatever. And I think that's at least also in the context we're in of changing, like business is changing so rapidly that no one will ever know everything. But if you don't, and you also alluded to it, Chisom, in terms of knowing your biases, what is it I don't know? What is it I haven't seen or haven't asked? So that curiosity of genuinely trying to understand and then make a decision, I think is a key skill that everybody, regardless of any diverse parameter, everybody can be curious. But it takes actually a lot of effort to demonstrate and to be curious in an organization, because many leaders think that because you are a senior leader, you don't ask questions, you tell people what to do, you show the direction, you make the calls, and you forget to actually listen and understand and inquisite a little bit, and then think, okay, now I know what the real thing is.
Can I continue a bit? Because I think this openness to learn is absolutely essential. And I think in terms of if we think about like being an inclusive leader, then we know that there's different kinds of leadership skills that you can learn. But I think what's a bit peculiar about the inclusive leadership is that it actually doesn't only require learning something new and putting that into practice. Actually, what you need to do first is unlearn certain things that you've previously thought are the kind of the right ways to do. And I think that's actually harder to unlearn and stop doing things in a certain way and then learn something new instead, and instead start doing things in a different way.
Thank you both for sharing. And I'm with you 100% on unlearning, because I think it's relatively easier to learn than to unlearn something that's quite close to how we engage, our values, or kind of like how we've always done something. One of the things that I find is quite useful, or for leaders who I think are quite brilliant, is like they know what they don't know, or they recognize that it's kind of one of those phrases I live by: you don't know what you don't know. No matter how much you think no matter how much you've read, no matter how much experience, you have, especially when we engage with things that affect people with different or intersectional identities will experience something differently from us. And we need to be able to know and recognize that this is the fact. Even though I experience the same thing, but I experience it differently, we need to understand that we don't know what we don't know. And this is why humility goes a long way for leaders, leaders who know that they can learn anything from even a child. Kenny?
Yeah, and again, I'm just thinking of some of those practical examples that I've learned in my own company with leaders, exactly talking about this, trying to understand. And they always say, but how do I know what I don't know? And then I say, well, if you look at people when you speak to them, if you realize that your intent of saying something or asking didn't actually match that impact or the response you got, you have a responsibility to be curious about this difference between intent and impact. And kind of closing the gap, because maybe you have a lot of biases that you're not aware of, or maybe the context was off. But again, as a curious person, whether you're a leader or a colleague, lean in and understand what was the gap here between intent and impact.
If I could just drag that just a little bit further on intent versus impact, I think oftentimes when things happen, there's a lot of focus given to the good intention behind it. Like, I didn't mean to cause harm, like I meant well. We get that. No one really, well, we hope that no one really wakes up thinking, yeah, today I'm going to cause harm, but it happens, right? And a lot of focus need to be on the impact of the experience. And there's a lot, it goes a long way to say, oh, wow, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause harm, but I recognize that I have. I'm sorry, I will do better. It diffuses any situation much quicker than saying, oh, come on, don't be too sensitive. I meant well, right? Yes. So it's the kind of the way I think about this intent and impact is your good intentions are irrelevant if they continue to cause harm to communities, to people. So we need to center the impact on that. And I know we can stay on this, or else I'm going to force us forward and go next to a question I have, trying to figure out where we are now in terms of the conversation. Maybe I want to ask about, I think, earlier on, Kenny had talked about that as a company, they just cannot afford not to take action. So, Heidi, if we can do this very quickly, just in the interest of time, we have 15 minutes left and I have quite a number of questions to get through. What are the risks actually, like when companies don't think like Kenny and their company does?
Yeah, I think there's like the obvious missed business opportunities. Then the kind of the not being able to attract the talent, but I think there's like a real risks in like a reputational risks also, like they can be more trickling, like the kind of a smaller things, but also there can be some bigger crises that you end up doing something very publicly because of not understanding. Like I think there's multiple examples of this. There's the latest one here in Finland was like literally yesterday. So there's like this, and you don't understand the impact of your intentions are always, of course, good, but then you do something very publicly and somebody picks it up and it becomes a big thing, and that damages the reputation and the brand quite badly. And to fix that, when you like, if you think, for example, sometimes these lead then that the companies then focus on, for example, DEI a lot more. But if you think about it, when you break something quite publicly, openly, and like, everybody knows, it's a lot harder to start climbing from that hole than if you're in a, let's say, neutral ground that, there is no crisis, but you start kind of climbing from a neutral ground and learning more and more. So I think it has like a multiple fold risks there, but personally, I don't think that any organization who does not actually for real focus on this, I don't think they will be doing very well in some years down the line.
Thanks for sharing. Stine, I want to come to you because, I mean, yes, we're talking about workplaces, but I think this type of thinking also kind of like filters outside of the workplace into societies and even within the workplace. I'm a believer in like policies and practices, right? We want to, I mean, it'd be great if all humans just do right all the time and we never have to write things into law, but sometimes we kind of have to, and most times it's important because that is what forces people to act accordingly. So my question is, within systems and structures, what do we need to bridge in terms of making or aligning policies to what is needed in society in a way that leads to lasting impact. So kind of like, if I just rephrase this, maybe to simplify it, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, oftentimes I feel like policies are too slow to catch up with what is actually needed to ensure and drive change. How can we bridge this gap?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And Kenny, I think, touched a little bit on it, but I think if I was to say something, I think, the UN Sustainability Goal number 17 pretty much sums it up, working together towards a more equitable future. The public sector and the private sector and the civil society needs to come more together to find solutions together, so that you don't experience that much of a lag in private sector in terms of what's happening in the civil society and such, those types of dynamics. And I've seen really good examples of this lately, in the private sector, where government officials ask us in private sector for advice on how can they push private companies. How can we push private companies? I know Vestre, when he was Næringsminister, Minister of Trade, he came to us and said, we really want to build a more equitable. I'm not voting for his party, just for that to be said, but he came and said, how can we actually make private companies be more equitable workplaces? How can we push about what can I do? What can the government do? I said, I need help. And the same thing, with the environmental criteria. How can environmental criteria in tenders, the government being such a big buyer, having so much power when it comes to procurement, how can what types of criteria can we put in our tenders for to hold private sector accountable, and actually asking the private sector for advice. What can we do? How can we work together so that it's actually sustainable, so it's actually doable? And then you also have, like, I was part of this arena is called the Go For It, which is actually the tech sector coming together, competitors and partners, like Kenny was talking about, that ecosystem of tech companies coming together with academia as well, to share, what's the latest knowledge and the practices in order to have and to build a more sustainable tech sector for the future. And then also bringing the government, inviting politicians in, pointing at different challenges, pointing at solutions, pointing at needs, so that we all get smarter and that lag doesn't, happen because of silo-based thinking.
Thanks a lot for sharing. Kenny, I'm going to come to you. I want to talk a bit about systemic biases, discrimination, power play, and how they impact equity or inclusive solutions around themes like sustainability and what have you. So I guess my question is, how do you find that these biases typically manifest within organizational practices, and what can be done to mitigate them?
Yeah, I think we definitely see it from, not every day, but often. I think a very low practical example that we have dealt with in our company is again the lack of curiosity to understand what it's like for an international colleague to move to Denmark and work for Novo Nordisk. Just assuming that, of course, you are well educated, you've moved from the US to here, you can manage on your own, that you don't need assistance or any kind of help in integrating. And the fact that we've completely forgot about the flexibility that we offer the Danish colleagues in working from home, working from your summer house, going to visit your family, whatever. Anyone who works or comes from another country don't have that flexibility. So that's, again, the system is just not designed for that we add more diversity to our employee base. So that we've worked with cChange. It's a very small example. But it really has a big benefit or a big impact on the notion of feeling equally included, that you can actually go back to the States to work there for 12 days a year to visit your family, not spending all your holiday on visiting family, but actually taking work time there. I think when we look to the patient side of it, the systemic biases we find here are also when you run clinical trials through 10, 12 years, you aim to reduce complexity as much as possible to be able to document that the medicines work, that you can collect the data and what have you. But as we're now moving into new therapy areas, we're meeting new types of patients, we're moving into vulnerable areas to run clinical trials. There's just a lot of inbuilt biases that we are beginning to uncover. And I think it comes back to this curiosity of asking and understanding, what does it feel like, or what is it like to be a new type of patient coming into this long process? If you are a patient in a trial, it's typically over 2, 3, 5 years, where you have to come into a clinic, you have to meet with the doctor, you have to report all of your stats and stuff like that. How is that possible for, let's say, a underprivileged single mom working or living in a rural area where you have to commute and stuff like that? So how can we change the way we design that clinical trial to meet that patient in her society, in her daily life, and make it easier? Because the big challenge when we run clinical trials is, of course, if patients drop out, just as for businesses, when people leave us, it's expensive. We've invested a lot of money in the relationship. So I think those are examples of where the systemic ways of doing things that we've done for a long time really kicks in and makes us zoom in on the biases, on what are the things we don't know and that we forget to ask up front.
Thanks a lot for sharing. Heidi, I want to come to you just on what can organizations do to kind of balance that need for sustainability, focused outcome, high performance, and well-being?
I don't think they are mutually exclusive. I actually think they all need each other. And I think it starts from like understanding that the social responsibility is a business imperative. And when like this understanding is there, like properly, not just on a high level, but like, why is this a business imperative in this specific organization, in this societies, these markets we operate in this sector we work at? So once that thinking is very clear, then I think the two others will follow. Like the well-being, I think that's I don't know, it's so self-evident that people need to feel well at work in order to perform well, but also in order to have those people who perform well, then you also need this whole system, like that will create the results that then in turn make sure that you are able to also deliver on all the outcomes that you have. So I think it's kind of like a parts of a same triangle looking from these different perspectives. I think it all kind of supports each other instead of competes with each other. And I think you can build in like systems that kind of also overlap on these things. So in a high performance organization, you can have like targets also set on like for example, team level on how do we act socially responsibly, what kind of practices, what kind of requirements we have, for example, for individuals in terms of creating an inclusive environment around them. So I think it's all very much linked together. And also I think to have it systematically part of the organization so that the goals, like for example, DEI, it's in the same way in the company top targets and the decision making and the bonus structures like those business goals or the financial goals, so that it's really like it's not just lip service or the whatever color washing, but that it's like actually inbuilt into the performance system as well.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I want to kind of like round up this bit so we can go on to the Q&A, and I see some really exciting questions for you to answer. So we like to kind of round up this bit by asking, what are your top tips for organizations, people to do better in integrating kind of like this way of thinking? And yes, it'd be great to have organizational perspectives. And then I often ask that people also think from the interpersonal perspective, what can I do? Because I think oftentimes, we kind of think of workplaces or leaders, systems and structures as things that don't concern us, like we don't have any influence on. So I think it could also be important to reflect that each and every one of us in this room and online watching and watching later, has power. So what tips do you have for us and organizations to do better? Kenny, I'll go with you because you're first on my screen.
Thank you. I think my tip is the curiosity and the asking to understand, and not asking to poke or to direct, but actually understand what the situation is. And I think the other element is this realization of how important the sustainability is and is becoming. I think we are still underestimating the impact and the desire, but also the requests from our younger generations coming in. We see daily examples of new colleagues who are joining right out of universities, asking very basic questions, but just in the way that we've organized our business, the things we hand out to them, where they're like, I don't need all of this. I don't want that. So I think, and that just puts up requirements to our business where we need to think into policies, into processes, systems, all of this. We could have also asked and learned all of this 5 years ago. So I think it's about how do we build all that curiosity into the way we do our business, so we as leaders and colleagues keep asking questions to learn and design our future together.
Thanks for sharing. Kenny, I like how critical you are with these questions. It's really good. Heidi.
I think my top tip is to think about it as a change management program, which kind of like helps to kind of classify in a way different levels about it. So in order to create this kind of a strategic change, let's call it, I think you need like 3 different levels of entities where the change needs to happen. There's the systemic level, which is the processes and the practices or the ways of working. So all those, we need to be able to critically look at them and find out where is the inequitabilities. What do we need to fix to make them more equitable? Then there's the leadership. We have talked about that a lot today. So I think they have a very big role, both in terms of kind of showing their buy-in and like proving that this is important and essential for the organization, but also in their towards their direct reports, like inclusive leadership skills and being able to lead those teams in a way where diverse people can thrive. And then the third level, how I think about this, is the individuals. So every single person there in the organization. How do I need to change the way that I interact with people, how I communicate with people? What do I need to learn? Like, what is the kind of what kind of culture do I create around me? And I think this is also then what I think what everybody listening in can do is like kind of the self-reflection of like how do I interact and communicate, but also starting that conversation or continuing or joining the conversation in the organizations and critically asking, what are we doing about this? And are we taking these aspects into account? So I think like it's quite often it starts from like small streams. It doesn't need to start with a huge bang, but I think what is needed is the beginning. Somebody needs to open their mouth and start the conversations.
Absolutely. I really love like the systems thinking and also how that boils down to us. And I think sometimes when we engage with these topics, it's easy to kind of be like, oh my gosh, I'm one person. There's not much I can do. I don't have power anyway. But what I'm also hearing from you is, that we all have some level of power. We all have some level of influence over something. We just kind of need to start, where we can and where we're at.
Exactly. And in the same way, what I think early on said about companies forming the society, so also individuals form organizations. Organization is not some separate organ somewhere, but it's like literally a collection of individuals.
Absolutely.
So individuals can also start things and start creating the conversations and the mass around the conversations.
Absolutely. Organizations don't exist in a vacuum, right? It's like
exactly.
We make it up. Thank you. Stine, top tips.
Okay, tying into what you guys already said, and I also love Heidi's approach to the systems thinking. I think, as a leader, you have to understand, your customers' needs and problems and solutions that, the customers needs to have to be met. At this, on the same level, you need to understand your company's role and in the society and its impact on the environment and its profit. Not just knowing the market position, but you also need to know your sustainability position. And what is your role in this? What is driving your agenda in this? So you can flip it around also to see what's your impact as a leader on the organization, on the broader community and planet. And then I'd say, invest in yourself, invest in your own sustainability skills. We are never finished. We never finish learning and developing. So I would say the same thing, I think Heidi touched upon it, key areas to keep growing in is within, transformative leadership, change management, self-leadership, DEI leadership. And these are areas that continue to progress and develop as well. And there are knowledge and tools that you need in order to be a great facilitator for sustainable progress, both inside your company and outside your company. And I say least but not least, practice courage and compassion. It takes a lot of courage to do like what you do all the time, Chisom, to show up and practice doing things differently than, especially when it's challenging long established norms and mindsets and systems. So it really starts with knowing yourself, knowing your team, in order to be able to unfold the greatest potential. And as my colleague says, remember that we all matter more than we think. You matter more than you think.
Thank you. Really great tips. I was kind of like taking notes, but that's kind of like what I do in these sessions. Like, oh my gosh, I have questions, but I can't. Okay, anyways, let's move on. Thank you. Really great tips, and really love, the honest and critical reflections. And you've all given us a lot to chew on. And now we're going to jump to the questions. I'm trying to make my way through them and the comments. So let me see what is the first questions. Okay, Shantani, if you're there, please help me. But I'm trying to get to the first one. Okay, let's all see. The first question was to Stine, but Monique answered it. It was about the book that Stine mentioned, which was You Matter More Than You Think. And then there was a question from LinkedIn. How have you responded to leaders who may view DEI efforts as less critical to business success? I think this is a question for everyone. So what do you say to leaders who are just like, DEI, please?
Well, if I was to start, I've had some white male leaders, top leaders that said to me, yeah, I really love the DEI. It's really it's great, but it doesn't really have anything to do with me. Like diversity, great. It doesn't really I don't feel like I belong, or I don't really feel part of that. And then really just sort of talking to those people, making them understand that they are actually very much part of it, and how they also, even though no matter what gender or what skin color or whatever, you're still part of the diversity mix and you still have a role to play there. And just just looking at like my I have a young boy. He just started videregående, and what we see there is that there's a lot of girls in the better grades you have. There's almost just girls at those schools, and it says something about the gender imbalance and things that also concerns men. And young boys. So we all have a role to play, and men have a big role to play also in guiding young boys and girls. So we all have a role.
Thanks for
I guess I'll
sharing.
stop there.
Thanks for sharing. Wondering if anyone else wants to comment before I move forward. Yes, no?
I really agree with Stine in terms of acknowledging that everybody plays a role. I think sometimes the curious questions are the why not? If you don't, believe in it, why not? Then I'm curious to understand that. And then it's also about, and I think the power of, storytelling about, do you want to be the one who does not develop the society forward for your children? Do you want your kids to come into a workplace that is not inclusive? So sometimes you can also push a few buttons to make, the arguments a little stronger, but without being provocative, but just asking, what if you don't see your own role in our company commitments, do you then see your own role in shaping a future for yourself and your family and your kids? That has, for me at least, turned out to be quite powerful arguments.
Yeah, and I could actually add to this, because I like also both these approaches and asking the questions. And I think quite often, if this is the starting point and then you ask a question, so in my experience, I sometimes then get the answer that, well, it's actually in our organization, we don't have any problems with this. And then I like to continue the discussion with kind of finding out that is that really so? Do they have data on it, that they have actual data of the different underrepresented groups employee experience, for example, or is this the perspective of this whoever person I'm talking to? And 9.9 times out of 10, there is no data. And most organizations believe data. So then I think when you get them to thinking in this way also, then it might be a way of helping to understand that what they think is true may actually not be true. And this comes back to our perspectives are different, and well, yeah, with different privileges, we have very, very different views, but not even going to that conversation, but even just that, have you actually, do you know for a fact that that's how your organization is?
Stine?
Yeah, just to comment on that, which is just a great observation, because the same thing happened to us in the Superstäder. Let me just share this. What happened is that we had all these we call it rainbow flags and things, and some, I caught someone say, well, it's isn't this a little bit too much, and I found myself finding myself, okay, maybe it's not really needed, because everyone here is sort of so inclusive, sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, I had people from the Pride organization coming to our office to discuss some partnership, and they were like, wow, I feel so safe here. And I was like, what? Do you feel safe? Yeah, just that you have these signs, and the flags, it makes me feel like, oh, this is the place where I really feel safe, and that I can be myself. And I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that. And that made me think, the next time a person would say, well, we got the point. Well, this is not for you. This is not for you that we have these flags. This is for other people that might feel like they need it in order to feel safe, So listening to, and that ties in with what you said, Kenny, as well, being curious. It's not just because you're not feeling some issue, then somebody else might feel the issue. I have many stories there, but I'll cut it.
Kenny, thank you.
Yeah, and I just wrote in the chat that just because it's not a problem for me doesn't mean it's not a problem. And I think just also building on a story that we also heard, we're also putting up the pride flag at our offices. And we had an international colleague who had moved, I think, from South America somewhere, who said, I am so happy to see this because I come from a country where I have been bullied and haunted my whole life. Now I come here, I have a good life here, but I can show all my friends that my company is flagging raising the flags. This shows that there are places in the world that are driving this forward. And just the value of that signal, he shared that in front of 200 colleagues and everybody got affected. Nobody had, they were all very privileged white Danes, but they realized, oh my God, not everywhere are people as privileged as we are. So again, it's not a problem for me, but it is definitely a problem for someone else. And we need to keep driving forward and showing that it can be done. So I think that's just a testament to how important it is.
Absolutely. Completely agree with all of what you've shared, all of you. And then I thought it could also be interesting to introduce another thought. And I think this came up for me. I think somebody had said something about, I guess, to this question where people are just like, well, DEI doesn't concern me, right? And oftentimes the initial thinking could go, let's think about the middle-aged white man. I do think, though, that there is something to be said, I think, for all of us who are on the DEI bandwagon, of even asking from that curiosity perspective, in what ways does DEI exclude people? Right? Like, in what ways does DEI, say, like, you're a white man, what do you have to say? Please hush it, right? We don't want to hear from you. You don't get to talk. That privilege you have, no, not in this room. And as much as we don't want to address that, I think like it's not heavily addressed enough. Now, it doesn't excuse the behavior of dismissing or causing harm, but I think it's something that needs to be interrogated further. And I think it does an entire panel discussion, but I think there's something there as well in terms of people feeling that maybe they can't contribute, or maybe they're not even included in the conversation. They're just there to be finger pointed at or blamed for not doing enough, for not caring enough. And I think there's also something worth unpacking there. So just kind of wanted to make it quite a nuanced conversation and add that. Heidi.
Yeah, because I remember sometimes like having some men joining in and kind of saying that, well, I feel bad for just being a man. So kind of like also I think that's definitely not the intent, to kind of like blame people for the background. Like nobody, in a way, like we are all born into what we are born into. And I think it's like it's very harmful to polarize this. So I think the more we can take everybody along and together create more inclusive workplaces, the better the outcome is for all the groups. There's research that shows that inclusive workplaces, they obviously are better for underrepresented groups, but they also are better for like the mainstream majority groups. So it's like it's not a cake that needs to be divided. It's yeah.
Absolutely. Like we need to learn to bridge across differences. And I think that's
Exactly.
quite important. I'm just mindful we have a lot of questions. So if I could move along, there's a question here, which I think is relevant in terms of how can global companies address conflicting sustainability standards that are in the world today, especially when they operate in different regions. Are there any tips for how they can navigate this in terms of like operations or like reporting? Anything coming up for you?
I think it's definitely a relevant question, and obviously there are sometimes conflicting targets and ambitions, and also in some parts of the world the journey is more mature than other parts. And I think it comes back to also my notion around big companies are leading the way, paving the way for smaller companies. So I think we could also view the sustainability agenda in that way. In some parts of the world, they haven't yet had the funds or the knowledge to invest enough, but we do have a lot of technologies in our parts of the world that we can share. And again, by sharing it, it doesn't decrease or diminish. It actually helps the planet even better. So I think we need to be also responsible of looking across, also with our global reporting frameworks. we do see where the problems are, and we have to lean in even more in those parts of the world to help, whether it's the policies that are not in place, if it's the technology that is not available, or if there are other systemic elements that we can impact.
Thanks for sharing. Stine, did you unmute yourself? No?
No, yeah. Well, just to draw on what Kenny said, I totally agree. And especially working, as you said, like internationally, you see that some areas of the world come more mature, and other areas are more mature in other places. And for instance, in the Nordics, the Pride agenda, or the that agenda, I don't know, I don't remember all the letters, come a long way. And what we've seen, like in Sopastera, where I used to work before, being sort of leading the way on that area as well. You can lead the way on different sustainability issues as well, and actually taking an international sort of leading the way and building an international path as well. So I think that is also really, really great, and to be able to cooperate with the different countries around the world as well on where can we learn and how can we do things better.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I have a, can you hear me okay? I'm not sure if I'm breaking up. Okay. I have a question here from Stamatia. It says, how can companies maintain their commitments to sustainability during times of crisis, such as economic downturns or global pandemics? I think, Kenny, you already talked about like conflict zones as well, where there might be intense pressure to prioritize short-term survival over long-term sustainability goals. Small question. Who wants to take it?
I'm happy to start.
Okay.
Stine, will you also?
No, go ahead.
I think it's one of those commitments that we cannot afford not to give up on it. I think we've seen a few unfortunate examples of companies who have withdrawn from the LGBTQ community out of fear of backlash or whatever, and I think they might have taken another choice if they knew about the consequences. I think it's totally fair if you are a company in a financial difficult situation, that you might scale down on activities, or you might pause something for better times. But pulling back or down prioritizing or canceling commitments, I don't think we will see that anymore. I think also with the transparency across, access to information, the penalty from your stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers, your employees, I don't think you won't see companies doing it, because it's that potential shitstorm that you also alluded to earlier, Heidi, is simply not worth it. Then it's better to be transparent around, we're going through a crisis or a situation, we're scaling down, we're pausing, we will do things differently. I think that's a more responsible way of doing it.
Thanks a lot for sharing. A bunch of questions came in, so I'm trying to look. So I lost my track, but there's a question here from Lauren that reads, how do we sustain hopeful energy in staff and people when implementing new diversity, inclusion, and sustainable programs and norms in this way, when there are pushbacks that can create struggle implementing these initiatives? I think so. Basically, how can we actually do the work when there's a lot of pushback? How do you navigate pushback?
I can start. I think it kind of depends on what the pushback is. If it's internal pushback, I think it means having open and honest dialogues and conversations, and be willing to hear and listen. And because I think this is not something that you can forced down somebody's throat. It's something that you need to help people to kind of come to those conclusions, but you can help them and open the kind of like the having the open conversations around it, and tying it to the kind of the I think I keep on coming back to the same, like tying it to that specific organization's business goals, people goals, values. So I think that's, or then if the pushback comes from the outside, I don't know if that's referring to this, but yeah, I think the organizational, this is how I see it.
If I could actually add something to that as well. I think oftentimes when pushback happens is because people experience what we're trying to do differently or in a negative way, right? I think we have to recognize that sometimes when you say something like, I want to work on unconscious bias, there are people who don't experience that as, oh, we're all going to learn and get better together. There are people who experience that as, you were saying, I have unconscious bias. You were saying that I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes engaging with pushback means that we have the clarity of mind to ask, what are you hearing versus what I'm saying? So this is practicing active listening, that listening to understand, not to respond. Because sometimes when there's a pushback, trying to understand why not, and doing that from a position of, I really want to learn. I really want to see how we can better meet you where you are. And we do this in a lot of different spaces where when we're marketing, we market to the specific target group. You're not just like one size fit all, right? So how do we talk to people within the organization, and how do we hear their concerns and ultimately their fears? And how do we, demystify or mitigate those fears? I think active listening also comes a long way in navigating that pushback. And I know when you're on the navigating side, it can be exasperating, can be annoying. Like, why do you even have to explain this? But the reality is, like, we're not all at the same level. We're starting at different points, and we need to be committed to bringing everyone along. And in organizations where we work, where Diversify works, so it's like, this is kind of what we find. Oftentimes, it's a break in communication, and active listening goes a long way. Stine?
Yeah, just to add on that, what you're saying there, and also what Heidi was saying, that, tuning into the fears, or actually what are the insecurities that gives that pushback, and also tying it into, what are their motives, if their motives are, what are they measured on, profits, and linking that into actual the people skills that's tied with the profits. And also what I've experienced that, really experienced and seasoned leaders that leading many people can still have a lot of fears on touching on these issues, because they feel like they're sticking their hand into a beehive, and so they really are scared to do the wrong things. And sort of just being attentive to those concerns, I think, is important.
Thanks for sharing. Kenny, I saw you might have wanted to say something. Maybe you changed your mind, or?
Yeah, no, I fully agree with Stine, and I think the fear of making a mistake shouldn't be holding us back. As long as you lead with curiosity, you can actually ask to be helped, to instead of just assuming I know what to do, or I know what I know, then ask. And I think then everyone is more than happy to help and guide.
Absolutely. Okay, last question here. I'm sorry to everyone who's asked questions we can't get to, but here's a question about digital transformation and AI, and I think it's relevant. So what role do you see technology playing in advancing both environmental and social sustainability within organizations? Who would like to go first?
I can take a go of it. I think it's an important, very, very important resource or technology that we are already tapping into, I think, across many industries. From a pharmaceutical point of view, I think I've talked a few times about the clinical trial process of 10, 12 years of running trials. Perhaps using technology and AI, we could shorten that time frame a lot. So what if we were able to leverage all the clinical study data that have been done over the last 100 years from all pharmaceutical companies and ask AI to figure out, if we add this medicine, what is going to happen to a patient that has these and these statistics. Then we would be able to, first of all, do it much faster, get the medicines faster to market, much cheaper, also a benefit, and even also reduce, the environmental impacts of running trials globally, shipping, stuff around the world. So I think and this is very kind of aspirational and pretty far out in the future, but I think it's leveraging the technologies and the possibilities is what's going to bring us further ahead.
I love this raising hands. Kind of reminds me of being in school.
Yeah. Well, just to add on that as well, it's like, we see digitalization driving modern society. Some really all parts of society is getting digitalized, from banking to public sector, everything, so to be able to have, to do your regular banking and also, getting services that you need from, from birth to grave, from Novo, you definitely need to be digitalized or to be digital, able to operate digitally. And also, we see that there's a big gap between people that are digital literate and those that are not, especially vulnerable are minority groups and elderly, and it's so easy to fall out of that gap. And it's really a major societal concern and challenge to make everyone included in the digital development and progress of society. And also, when we are making, developing digital products and services, it's so important that everyone, all different types of user perspectives are taken into account, so that when we go to Novo to get some service that we see, family service, that we see a family that actually looks kind of like your family, and it might not look like another one's family, and it might not be the traditional mother and father and two kids. It could be two fathers, it could be one mother, they could look differently, and that needs to be reflected so that everyone feels that they're part of this whole system and the solution that is provided by government and by private sector. And also, when we look at the IE, there is our AI, it's like so many discriminating factors that can go into it, and we really need to have a real close eye on the way that is unfolding.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Heidi, a quick thought, and then
I was going to touch upon the AI. That's like we need to be like super mindful of the data that it's learning on, because we know that a lot of the existing data is biased, and if we teach it to be biased, it will be biased. So I think that's something when using AI, especially for the social responsibility side, this needs attention.
And thank you all for sharing. Just to add a quick thought on that, I think it's also important that we remember that AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's only exists because of the information that people give to it. So the responsibility also comes down to us. It's not some technology trying to take over the world. It's us. We have the responsibility to inform with accurate and representative data. And with that, this has been a really, really amazing session. And I know it's 2 hours and it's longer than most panel discussions out in the world, but I feel like I could do it for 5 more. So thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge, for sharing honestly and constructively. I look forward to watching this again, learning from it. To the participants, both here and with us here on Zoom, and also those watching digitally on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here. Kenny, Heidi, Stine, I appreciate your time. And I know these days time is hard to come by. So thank you so much for your time.